This is David Prosper, host of Shepherd Revolution. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast from Public House Media.
Hello.
Hey, man, what's going on?
Hey, Jay, what's up, man?
You ready to talk movies?
I'm ready to talk movies. Let's do it.
Nice.
Hello and welcome, Fear and Therapists, to the latest installment of Fear and There. I am Zachary, and I'm calling in from Beacon, New York.
And I'm Jay, calling in from Astoria, Queens, New York City.
Which is your full-time home, if I remember correctly. Isn't that right, Jay?
Yeah, for the time being, though, our lease is up in June, and we're having some very serious life conversations right now. So,
are you really? And are these conversations? I don't know. I mean, where do these conversations take you? What are the options?
Well, I mean, I think like everybody, everybody in this city, we're overpaying for rent and not getting the full benefits of living in the city. It's ironic to say, because we picked this apartment, we've been here 3-4 years now. No, I guess 3 years. This will be the third year right here. We've been here for 3 years, and we picked this apartment specifically because it's pretty big for New York City standards. It's, it's like 700 square feet, 2-bedroom apartment. It's got this extra room. So we have our bedroom, which can be kind of empty other than just like our bed. And then we've got this second room that I'm recording the podcast in, which we use as an office and a music room and that kind of thing. But it's just, we pay a lot of money in rent. And so we're just sort of like, we're at the point in our lives where we're deciding whether we want to move. And then when we're talking about moving, especially with all these jobs going remote now,
Right.
We don't need to live in a metropolitan area. And if we're not living in New York, where are we living? Are we going to be living somewhere where it makes more sense to purchase a home? And then now we're spinning out into 3 different other conversations about whether we're ready to do that. So, I don't know if that answers your question, because we've literally just started talking about it, but all signs are pointing to we're probably not going to be renewing this lease. So.
Man, I helped you move into that place. I like that place very much.
Yeah, it's a good spot. It's a third floor walk up, which is annoying. It was annoying for you, I'm sure.
Yes, moving you in. Yes, that was definitely annoying. But you had, if I remember correctly, you had hired a very spry and hyperactive professional from, I don't know, what did you use? TaskRabbit, I think. And
TaskRabbit, yeah.
He drove a little car. He drove I think he drove a coupe. Not a coupe, a Mini Cooper.
A Mini Cooper, yes.
Yeah. And then you bought us barbecue. It was a good day. It was a very good, sweaty, delicious day.
Yeah, for those people who don't know, this is I believe the second time Zach has helped me move into an apartment in New York. True. The first one was like, I don't even know that you really referred to it as moving, because we moved like 3 pieces of furniture in.
Yeah, that was an easy one.
This second move was, Julie and I moving into a 2-bedroom apartment with lots of stuff. So it was, it was a good day. And you're a good friend for helping us move. So we appreciate that.
And don't you forget this favor that I did for you 2 or 3 years ago. Never forget this favor.
I will not. I will treasure the memory.
Treasure it always. Treasure the memory, but don't put it on the cloud. And there's the segue to the film of the week, which is Unfriended, Dark Web, the sequel to Unfriended. This is a 2018 film directed by Steven Susko, who I believe has screenwriting credits, or perhaps even is the lone screenwriter for The Grudge and Texas Chainsaw 3D, which I didn't see, and I'm proud of that fact. So as a matter of fact, I believe, Jay, that we saw Unfriended together in the theaters. Is that correct? Is that your memory too?
We definitely saw it together, and I was trying to remember if we saw it in the theaters, and I'll tell you why I had the thought.
I'm pretty sure we did.
It's because I was sitting there on my couch like an old man squinting at the TV trying to read the messages being typed. I was like, why didn't I do this last time? Oh, because we watched it on a 40-foot screen. So
I actually think that you trekked all the way out to Brooklyn to see it. I'm pretty sure we saw it at BAM. And I'm also pretty sure that it was a singularly surprising film experience because by any account, the conceit for this film and its predecessor called what does the director call it? He's sort of invented.
I think did they call it desktop horror?
It's not. You know what? I'm gonna break a rule for myself here, and I'm gonna look it up.
I mean, I've heard it referred to as desktop horror. There's another movie called Host that also follows the same shtick. But I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't call it that. You know.
No, he has a. Oh hell! Screen Life. Screen Life. That's the name of it. The Screen Life genre, which is what Steven Susko has dubbed this genre of horror film, and it really is a burgeoning genre. I mean, you just mentioned Host, of course, which is a very, very timely film. But what I was saying was that by no accounts does this conceit seem like it will lend itself to a decent motion picture, horror film motion picture. And yet I remember walking out of Unfriended at BAM with you being sort of amazed that it was so much fun and it was such an effortlessly well done movie, and it really worked. It really, really worked. And so for me, coming into Unfriended Dark Web, my very first question, and it's in fact the first thing that I wrote on my notes while I was watching, was how can they milk anything new out of this concept? And so I'll be interested to talk to you about this. But I think that, as we like to do on our podcast, we like to discuss our context and also how we watched this film, just the physicality of watching this film. And so my context is that I saw the first one with you, which to my mind probably means that you had the exact same context as me. But is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I think there's a lot we can talk about with this sort of subgenre, which is home to 3 movies.
Right.
But yeah, I agree. I think part of why we enjoyed that first film so much is because we came in with our expectations so low that it almost couldn't under-deliver.
Right.
And so, yeah, that's my context, is that this movie in concept should be bad. These 2 movies should be bad. And whether they are bad or not is in the eye of the beholder. But I can say that you and I both agree that the first one is not a bad movie. So, same context for sure.
But I did do something a little bit different in watching this movie, though. I in all of the months that we've been doing our podcast, let me not. I'll abandon that thought and say this. I watched this movie on my laptop. Well, I used my monitor, actually. I have a pretty big, 18-inch, 20-inch, whatever it is. Or maybe it's much bigger than that. I have no idea. Computer monitor that I plug my laptop into. And I watched the movie on that. It's the first time I've watched a movie on this thing. I've only had this thing for 3 months. And I did it because I happened across a review of this film that I did not read entirely. But I read, because I didn't want it to be spoiled for me, but I read the first sentence. And it was basically like, this guy started watching the film on his big TV, and then it occurred to him that the best way to watch this movie would be on a computer. And I thought, of course it is. Right? So that's how I watched it. You watched it, I think, on the couch like an old man, I think you just said.
I did, yeah. I didn't have I left my glasses. I have a very weak prescription for seeing signs when I'm driving, so I leave my glasses in the car. And I rarely need them for the TV, but when I'm reading lots of tiny print, I realized that I was missing a lot of plot by not seeing what by seeing what he starts to type and then what he deletes, and then that all tells us a lot about the character. But one interesting fact about how I watched it, which you'll get a kick out of this. So Julie was in the next room on her computer, and I was watching it on our Apple TV in the living room, and she about a third of the way through the movie accidentally started airplaying her screen to our Apple TV.
That's terrifying.
I was like, wait, what? And I went in, and she was like, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I'm sorry. And I was like, do you know what movie I'm watching? Come watch 3 minutes of this movie with me and tell me why, and you'll know why you're not supposed to do that right now.
That's amazing. That's great.
So it's just the average couch at night in my living room. So
It's funny. I also had a sort of technological mishap with this film. It's not as frightening as yours or as like kind of tonally perfect in its error, but I actually looked for this movie to put on a few weeks ago before we decided we were going to do this episode for it. And I just got a Roku and I searched for it and I found it, and I found it on some streaming channel I'd never heard of, and I downloaded the streaming channel and I got through the first 10 minutes of the movie. I watched 10 full minutes of this movie before I finally had the wherewithal to check what language this movie was. For whatever reason, I thought it was like a Spanish language film because everyone was speaking in Spanish. And only 10 minutes into the movie that it occurred to me that their lips weren't matching up with what they were saying, that it was a Spanish dub. And I felt so stupid. I sunk 10 minutes into this movie thinking like, wow, what an incredibly immersive experience that I'm just watching a movie in Spanish without any subtitles. And it's by design. I was actually starting to think it was brilliant before I realized that I was the antithesis of brilliant. And I was stupid.
Yeah. Well, I feel like you've done that before. Didn't you? You started watching The Platform, I think, dubbed rather than subtitled.
Yes, that's right. I did. Yeah. That's right. Oh God. Anyway. So let's do our recommendations before we put the spoiler wall up. At this point in the episode, we like to recommend or not recommend the film du jour. It's interesting. I don't really know why we do this other than maybe as like a way of telling podcast listeners, like if we recommend it, maybe you want to pause and go watch it. And if we don't recommend it, maybe you want to keep listening so you can hear us rip it apart. So I guess that kind of does make sense.
I think it's like the ethos of who listens to a horror movie podcast.
Sure.
I think some people want to listen and don't want to see the movie. Some people,
right.
Some people have seen the movie, want to relive it. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's just a nice, it's a nice way to pivot over to our review. So,
and I mean, movie fans we're a weird bunch. Like I cannot tell you the amount of time I have watched like a video essay or read a review or read a whole discussion on Twitter or whatever about some movie that came out that's terrible that I've never seen and never will see. But like, I still want to like be completely immersed in the discourse, even though I remember like after the Bohemian Rhapsody movie came out, watching this video essay about why it's like one of the worst edited movies of all time. And I was like giggling like a schoolboy. I thought it was so funny and awesome, and I'll never see that movie. So I understand the appeal. So Jay, would you recommend this film? Would you recommend this sequel to Unfriended?
No, I don't think so. I would recommend the first one. That's going to be my short answer, I think, kind of throughout this. It's hard because, like you said, this idea, this concept, which is now turning into a subgenre, like whatever the 20-aughts version of found footage is, that's kind of what this is, I guess. So, it's hard to not recommend it because it's one of like 3 movies that does this. So if you're some sort of completionist of horror and you want to, see all the movies that do this, like this is one of 3. So I think I would recommend it, I guess, for some weird twisted completionist person. But I think the first one does almost everything infinitely better than this movie. So, yeah, I don't think I recommend it kind of on its own merits.
Very good. Very good. Duly noted.
What about you, Zach?
This is going to be fun. I'm really glad that you said that. I was trying to predict how your feelings about this movie, and now I kind of feel like this might be another film that we differ on. I would recommend this movie, but and I don't particularly want to talk about why until we put the spoiler wall down. I would recommend this movie. I think it's pretty effective. I think it's pretty fun, and I also think it's pretty horrifying, which is kind of the trifecta of what you're looking for in a horror movie. It's not a work of art. It's not.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Once again, I had low expectations that I felt were surpassed. So let's put down the spoiler wall and let's get into it, because I'm excited to talk about this one.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, spoiler wall is going up right now.
Welcome to the other side of the spoiler wall. So, God, so I don't even know where to start with this one. So I actually found this movie. Well, I'll just start with like the most like visceral reaction. I found this movie, and this is not, you'll have to forgive me for the unsophistication of this question, but I found this movie to be genuinely scary. I was scared by this movie in a way that I haven't been by most horror movies just over the last couple of years of my life. And I am interested to hear, Jay, if you found this movie scary. Well, if that's one of your issues with it.
I mean, no, I didn't. I don't know how to answer the question without digging into other things.
That's fine. You can. No, I fully like. I want this conversation to be as freewheeling and as free associative as it can be. And I've got questions planned, as a good host does. But I say we just go for it. Yeah.
I think so. This movie tries to cover two things. In my opinion, it covers whatever you called it, live screen. What did you call it?
It's screen life. Maybe it's already
screen
gone.
life. Yeah, whatever. It tries to cover that. Essentially, you sitting in the driver's seat of a MacBook Pro 2016. Whatever. So it does that. So that's one thing, which I think you and I agree is the novel concept of these movies. Yes. Which is what sets the expectations so low, and it puts you in a very visceral feeling, because we all do this almost every day, like we don't do the same things and whatever, but like there's something about seeing on screen somebody hop on a video call and then jump over to a Facebook message and then like go to the Finder and dig through files that you don't know what they are. Like,
yeah, right.
It's stuff that we do that has a sinister layer painted on top of it. So perhaps that's one aspect that could be scary. So that's one thing that they try to cover, which they do well in the first movie as well. So the second thing that this movie tries to dig into is something that is more common, or not more common, is more yuckier. They try to talk about the concept of like snuff films and the dark web. So the only thing that I could say that I found actually disturbing about this movie was just the concept of people that want to see people murdered, like for real. They don't want to watch a horror movie. They want to watch what is essentially the real life version of a horror movie. And so I wanted to bring up a couple of quick movies related to that I think also try to capitalize on this fear, or try to capitalize on this subject. And they're two very, very, very different movies, and they both leave you feeling gross. The first one is Sinister, which did you see that?
That's Ethan Hawke, right?
Yep.
I did see that. He's a novelist, or he's a true crime writer, I should say. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And the whole point of that movie is him finding videos of, first person videos of these horrific murders. And that's gross and that's scary. And I think Sinister is a much scarier movie traditionally, because it also mixes real life. You don't spend the whole movie behind a computer screen per se.
Right.
The other movie that I watched recently that I think does this in a much grosser way, and it's not fiction, it's a documentary, which I don't know if I would recommend this documentary. It might even be a documentary series. It is called, I believe the series is called Don't Fuck with Cats. And it is about, do you remember, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, maybe a little longer, this sort of like reached my radar in real life, in pop culture. It reached my radar quietly, but I didn't dig into it. There was some guy who had posted a video of him killing a cat. And then the internet, historically, kind of comically so, loves cats. Like that's, cat videos is like a thing that like dates back to the first iteration of internet videos. So the whole premise is that as soon as this guy posted this video, the entire internet joined hands and tried to find out who he was and get justice on him, right? This documentary is about the people that are trying to hunt for this guy who killed cats on the internet.
Oh, jeez. That's so intense.
And it's actually a really, really well done documentary, but it is about something that A, is very hard to watch and leaves you feeling gross, and B, it's kind of like, in the same way that, something, way more horrible, somebody, sets off a bomb or commits a terrorist act, that the person's name becomes kind of famous / infamous in the press. And I think there's something about, I don't know, giving more credence to this person who did this, because spoiler alert, they end up catching the guy and end up putting him on trial. And it isn't just cats. They end up finding out that he killed somebody for real. So, anyway, that's not spoiling because that happened in real life. So I don't know. I think that part was scary, but it wasn't scary in the way that I want something to be scary. It was like, I don't know what this movie was trying to say about that, other than the fact that these people exist and they are horrible people, and this is a horrible thing that exists in the world. So I guess that was scary. But I don't know if that answers your question, but I think the first movie does better with the screen perspective, and the second movie, it goes for this sort of dark web thing, which could be scary to some people, but to me, it just sort of like was gross and dark,
Yeah. I think that's all a really excellent point, and it's well taken. I don't remember feeling scared very much by the first movie, mostly because it was a ghost story, and that didn't bowl me over. Whereas with this, and I mean, you already talked about this a lot. I mean, the actions, what we're watching, and it's a little bit more. It's a little bit different than like a simple POV thing. I mean, movies have experimented with first-person point of view camera before, and it's almost always a silly gimmick. It never really immerses you into the character, into the character's perspective, and more often than not, it just makes you motion sick. But this, and this is not. I mean, this is so. It's not just. It's not like to say that it's a universal perspective. The one of what what it looks like when we browse our computer. It's almost understating it, especially given the last 10 months and how much more time we're spending on our computers. Even if it's just an extra couple hours a day. I mean, it's not like most people, or I shouldn't say most people, a lot of people, especially in white collar jobs, are going to offices and they're sitting on their computer for 8 hours a day anyway, and then they go home and they sit on the computer for 4 more hours and they go to sleep. But it's different now. And so I found that to be pretty effective, especially given the life that we're all living, that a lot of us are living right now. But I wonder, though, if my experience with it, my fear of it, how much it's tied into something like, and I would say a couple of months ago, I got one email. The first email freaked me out, and then the next several came in very, very quickly, and I was like, oh, this is bullshit. This is nothing. But I got an email, and the subject line was an old email password of mine. I had already, it wasn't that big of a deal to me, because I hadn't used that email password already in many, many, many months. And I have since gone back and upgraded all my passwords to have much more, many more members of the alphanumeric family. But it definitely frightened me at first, because the email, and I realized later that it was copy pasta. It was just copy and pasted the shit, because I kept on getting a lot of them. Was like my email password was in the subject line, and the body of the email was this long, incredibly poorly written, or I should probably say poorly translated, threat about, I have your password, and if you don't transfer X amount of, I don't remember what the currency was. It could have even been Bitcoin for all I know. If you don't transfer X amount of currency to this account or this email address by blah, 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 then, all your secrets will be shared or some shit like that. And I was like, it scared me at first. And then I started to think about it, and I was like, there's really, I don't have any secrets. There's nothing like that would be so shameful that they could share that's on my computer that's worth paying a lot of money to keep hidden. So I wasn't all that afraid of it. But it was a level of, it was a violation that that definitely freaked me out a little bit. And then, of course, I got like 5 or 6 more in quick succession that had exactly the same text and from different addresses. And that was, I was like, okay, this is part of some massive data breach of some very old thing, and it's not a big deal. But I had that on my mind when I was watching this movie, and I just felt that I didn't have, this movie is playing on a fear that increasingly more people are having. I mean, the common recommendation if you have a webcam is to keep it covered now. That's the common recommendation, which is something that I still need to do. But it's like, it is not far-fetched. It is not an exotic, far-fetched possibility that someone could hack into your computer and flip on your webcam without you knowing it and record you and bust into any of the other gizmos that you've got in your house and manipulate them. And all that stuff is perfectly within the realm of possibility. And I do find that frightening. So for me, the scariness of this movie was, when we talk about this a lot, Jay, we talk about is a horror movie scary in terms of images that are, sort of seared onto your retina long after you finish the story or the movie and you keep seeing them when you close your eyes? Or is it scary in a more ambient sort of way or conceptually scary? And for me, this movie really frightened me in a conceptual way. I just kept on thinking about the really horrific violation that happens constantly of hacking, of getting, getting broken into and getting your personal data stolen and sold, and who the hell knows?
What's interesting about what you're saying, and again, you're making me think about things in a different way, which is what we like in this podcast. But I constantly gauge a film's scariness, like you said, based on its are there visual things that get seared onto my brain or whatever it is,
right?
And I don't know if that, now that I'm thinking about it, that's not necessarily what I mean. The reason that those visions scare me so much, and some examples that I can come up with here are like Annie crawling around on the ceiling in Hereditary, or like the demon witch woman sitting on top of the wardrobe in The Conjuring. These are all examples of things that I've said, oh, these are viscerally scary. These aren't conceptually scary. These are scary visuals, right? But that's, now that we're talking about it, that's not what I mean. What I mean is I'm trying to sleep and I can't because I'm picturing Annie crawling around on my ceiling. So is it fair for me to say that a movie that scares you because of hackers, or a movie that scares Julie because it's a home invasion movie,
right,
and doesn't scare me in the same way that a demon movie would, maybe, because I'm saying, okay, you're not sitting there laying in bed. I mean, maybe you are. I don't want to say what you're scared of.
Don't
or what you're
tell me what I'm doing.
Yeah. But if you're laying in bed, you're not thinking, oh my God, is there a hacker on my computer right now? It just doesn't hit you that same way. But does that mean the movie's not scary? No, you're sitting there thinking of it in the afternoon, oh shit, what if all of my money's gone? That's scary in a totally different way. So it's interesting that you bring it up, because it wasn't scary to me. There were not nearly as many scary visuals.
No, there were hardly anything at all.
Which is interesting. Well, sorry. Go ahead. I don't want to keep rambling on this.
I was just gonna. No, you weren't at all. I was just gonna add that it's not only that there weren't any scary visuals in this movie. It's that there were so many fucking stupid visuals in this movie. I couldn't get over After I finished the movie, of course, I gobbled up a few different reviews, and a number of the reviews mentioned the fact that this wasn't a supernatural movie. But the way that these Charon characters, these hackers, these dark web denizens, use the computer, use technology, it's so implausible and ludicrous and stupid and unrealistic.
Isn't it a supernatural movie?
People keep on saying that it's not, but my takeaway was, of course it is. There's no power. There's no hacking code or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm obviously revealing my ignorance about this shit. But there's nothing that you could program that's going to make you appear like a pixelated block on any camera in real time all at once. Maybe on your own personal computer, sure. But like, there are just too many things. There were too many really, really silly things.
Yeah, I guess the idea is that we're supposed to have believed that they use some sort of technological cloaking mechanism or something like.
Yes, yeah.
But to me, these like people that were appearing as pixelated monsters and then showing up and then whatever, who later it became known were real people, aren't actually, like, I don't know, like, it's you're right, they sort of just glossed over the physical world because they were like, oh, you don't understand half the shit that's going on, so you don't need to understand this.
Exactly.
I think what's interesting in terms of visual scares, you're right, that is what they leaned on. They leaned on some pretty gruesome deaths, but they were not particularly brutal, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know how,
right.
I mean, to a certain degree, every death is brutal. I don't want to downplay death, of course. But the reason I think that the first movie was scarier to me was because, ghosts and possessed laptops would scare me more probably than real people. But there was just very gory deaths in the first one. I don't know how much you remember about the first one.
I actually don't. It makes me kind of I kind of want to rewatch it. I don't remember it too well.
Well, there's this horribly gruesome scene where it's this like really funny. I don't know if we're giving the filmmaker too much credit here, but it's this really funny kind of Chekhov's gun moment in that movie where there's a blender at the beginning. He's making like margaritas, like the party boy is making margaritas at the beginning. And then later it kind of cuts to him like being possessed and shoving his hand into the blender.
Oh, I do remember this. Yes.
Just these horribly bloody things. And they were scary. And they were scary moments that were like, that's hard to watch. In this movie, they really pulled a lot of punches, oddly because internet death videos could be way gorier than this movie led them to be.
Exactly.
It seems like they chose, and we talk about this a lot, they chose implied violence over like overt, keep the camera trained to the incision violence.
Right.
But yeah, it's interesting because you're right, the only real scary stuff, if you can call it scary, were these sort of like the fact that this was a network of people that had powers over you that you didn't understand, basically.
Exactly. I wonder, I think that a lot of this conversation needs to we need to be talking about the conceit. There's still more to talk about with the novelty of screen life or whatever. Is there any hope for this genre? Like, do you think that this can actually be a subgenre, like an effective subgenre? Do you think that people will find clever ways to make this fresh, or is this really just a gimmick? I mean, I have read that the director is thinking about a third movie in this. I don't know. He wants a franchise, and I feel like okay, a lot of really, really, really good art. In fact, some of the most famous art of all time has come out of artistic exercises with self-imposed restrictions. Right? Yeah. Like you want to make a movie, but every line of the script needs to be in alphabetical order or some bullshit like that. That's a random example. But I just feel like with the screen life that the restrictions are there too many. They're just simply too many. And what you lose when shooting a film, if you can even call it shooting, when screen recording a film like this, far outweighs what you could possibly gain from it. And in fact, whatever you can gain from it is probably already gained from this, the first Unfriended. And I think that I've heard some pretty decent things about Host. I think that people have said it's a pretty decent movie, all things considered. So I mean, I don't know. I do you think that this has a future, this subgenre, or do you think the limitations are we've already hit them and that's it?
Yeah, that's a question. Yeah, I think, and this, sir, is an answer. Yeah, we've talked about this before on the podcast. I think you and I both, I went to school for music and technology, and you went to school. Well, I guess I don't know what you did undergrad, but you were a creative writing grad student. those degrees are both very, you're doing artistic projects, and setting rules for yourself is the only way to oddly be creative. I think right. There's something about brain chemistry that if there are so many choices, you get this choice paralysis, and then you don't come up with anything good. And so I think a cleaner example of what you're saying is like artists often do this, even without, visual artists, even without thinking about it, they'll say, I would like to sketch this fruit and I'm only going to use this pencil. Like that's, right. You're limiting yourself. You're not painting, you're not sculpting, you're not looking around to see what finds inspiration. It's why still life is a thing. It's like, you're literally just depicting what's in front of you, and that's your restriction. So this is the most extreme version of that. And I think it's interesting that you pointed out, because I don't think the genre needs more movies. Maybe this could like reach equilibrium at half a dozen, but there's kind of two things you bring up there. One, are we still just talking about a computer? Is it a computer, or are we going to reach some point where somebody makes a video game horror movie where they're on a PS5? Is that what you would do in the genre? Are you sitting, in a movie theater? Like, what if the movie theater is the thing? That feels so ancient now in 2021. But what I liked about, sorry, go ahead.
Did you ever watch? This is just a quick interruption. Did you ever watch? There was an anime / video game that I played when I was, I feel like in high school on PlayStation 2. That was like it was an anime about kids playing a video game. And so like half the video game, half the episodes were like in the video game world and the other half were in real life. But of course they started to like bleed into each other. It was wonderful. It was so cool. And there was a video game that was based on it that I also played. I'll have to figure it out. It doesn't sound familiar to you. I'll have to figure it out. Anyway, please keep going.
Yeah, I don't know. That's what I think the natural progression, because everything's already been done. So to differentiate, like to be a computer, it would need, you could maybe have a couple more of these, but it'd have to be multiple computers, or you'd have to, like one thing, like this movie in particular tried to expand things because it used a phone as well. Like it used this Facebook video call, and she had to bring it onto the subway. So you got this second perspective that you didn't really get that much in the first film. So, you're going to see a widening of the parameters if this is, if I'm reading your question correctly on, are we seeing a rash of movies that are screen captures? Maybe, but maybe we shift to phones and TikTok and all that. Like, I don't know if you remember, like, we're not even really talking about the plot. You're zooming out so far and talking about, what are the virtues of setting up restraint in your art? Right. Which is what I think, like these movies fucking commit. They commit to the format, and they do not stray until the very end of the movie when you do that like zoom out thing. So
yes, right.
I think it's interesting because what the first film covered conceptually fits better to me, because they're using like this conceit, this restriction, this format to talk about the dark web in the second one, which is like a big, capital letter thing. It is this deep, dark place in the internet that people are like, oh, well, I've seen the bad stuff that's on the regular internet. What's on the bad internet? So it's like, how do you wrap your head around that? The first movie was about cyberbullying. That's what the first movie was about.
That's right. That's right. Oh, and that was good. Yeah. Uh-huh.
And I think it's interesting because you could explore more concepts using this conceit. You could explore, like, this movie ostensibly explores dark web, but dips its toes into cybersecurity. You could go even further on cybersecurity. Maybe you don't even do a horror movie. Maybe it's like a rom-com about this stuff. Or wasn't there a movie with, oh God, where this dad has a missing daughter and
searching?
Yeah, Search, is that what it's called?
With Cho, with
yes.
John Cho, I think. Yeah. I love that movie.
I guess that would be more of a thriller, I would say.
Yeah.
But it used this concept. So, yeah, I don't know how to answer your question. I think what's more interesting is, like, let's think of the rules that this movie set up for itself, and what are other rules that we can set up for ourselves. Like, it's, I think, partially why the Paranormal Activity series did so well, because every time they widened the boundaries, they set up new rules that were interesting. Like, semi spoilers for these movies, but the first movie is just one camera set on a tripod. The second movie, they're like, oh, well, now this family has a security system, so they have 6 camera angles. And then the third movie, which ironically is a sequel, so they can't like make the technology better. But in the third movie, the guy's a filmmaker, so he knows how to set up the cameras to catch the action, and he like retrofits an oscillating fan to make the cameras move back and forth in this really sort of like anxiety-inducing way. Yeah, you're asking something that I think is really interesting. I frankly think you're giving the credit. Maybe you're not. Maybe I'm just reading into it. But you're giving credit to this format in much broader strokes than I think it warrants. If you ask me,
right? I think you're right. I do think you're right. I would be more than happy to give this one more go. Like I really would. After this movie, which I enjoyed for what it was, I found it to be fun. Mm-hmm. I found it to be stupid, and I did find it to be scary. I also found it to be like I said stupid, but I found it to be pretty stupid. I mean, it's pretty stupid. And I could do without half these characters, if you could call them characters, and blah blah blah. But
I wanted to ask you, like, maybe you don't think it's worth talking about them, which is why you've zoomed out so far on this. We didn't talk about any of the content. Like, there are archetypes in this that they seemed to put emphasis on. Like, the first movie was a very white movie. It was a very like suburban white movie.
Right.
This movie is like, okay, we've got a British guy, and then our protagonist is a white male, but our protagonist's girlfriend is a person with disabilities. She can't speak. And that is part of, she can't hear, and she's a deaf person, and that's part of this movie. But then the other side characters are an interracial lesbian couple that I think actually delivers the best performance in this movie. So I don't know. It's we didn't talk about this. That was clearly a choice. They clearly wanted this representation in the movie. And I think it's interesting that you haven't even talked about the characters. Do you think that they were just like so half baked that it's not even worth discussing it?
Yeah. I agree with you that there was a bit of a spectrum. I think as far as quote unquote development goes, you immediately hit a brick wall. And I think that's one of the biggest limitations of this form. Is that it's not a movie that gives characters space to grow or change at all. They're all very sort of one note. I agree with you. I think the recently engaged couple, I think they were pretty good. But the British guy serves only to translate some of the language, some of the jargon into layman's terms. Our protagonist is about as boring as they get, which is always a problem with protagonists. And his relationship, and you're right, I didn't even mention, the fact that his girlfriend, Amaya, is deaf, which is suddenly a pretty popular horror movie quirk. And I certainly get why. Like the movie Hush, of course, comes to mind. I certainly understand why. It adds a level of tension that I personally feel like is unearned and also possibly a little exploitative, but I don't know about that.
You're talking about the lesbian couple now?
No, I'm talking about the deaf Amaya. Who is deaf.
What does it say that it could be either of them?
Exactly.
I agree. She was sort of like, I mean, if you want to get super far down this road, the movie is told through the perspective of our male protagonist who decided to create an app to help him translate what she is saying to him rather than take an ASL class and learn how to communicate with her. Which is is that a fucking stand-in for like, I don't know, white male privilege and like not listening to women? these are so like there's so many swings that were sort of half taken. They were like we were walking we were walking through like a gross dark web via computer screen, and we were distracted by all these shining techno lights of like hackers and shit. And then as we're going through, we get smashed in the face with pies, and each pie is like, hey, lesbian couples, they have a plight, and hey, women are objectified, and hey, and it's like, wait, what the fuck are you trying to do with this movie? So I think that's sort of that was, and maybe that was why I didn't like it
virtue
that
signaling.
much. Yeah,
no, but it's a little virtue. It's definitely virtual. It was definitely virtue signalish.
Virtual virtue signaling.
Virtual virtue signaling. Good. So one thing that I do want to bring up, which yes, you I think your observation that I have a very macrocosmic view of this is a funny and smart observation. It didn't even occur to me that I was like totally just skipping over what actually happens in this movie. But this is pretty much the last thing that I feel that I have to say about this movie is that other than, this is in my recent watching history, other than Funny Games, the Michael Haneke film, or Michel, I don't know, it's French, silly French people.
Is it French?
Isn't
it like a movie,
or is he Dutch? Or is he
Dutch? Yeah, it's a Dutch movie.
Oh, is he?
I could be wrong. We were going to cover this on the podcast. But.
He's actually Austrian. Go figure. So we couldn't be more wrong. Anyway, other than Funny Games, I cannot remember the last time I watched a more misanthropic, nihilistic, hopeless, unredemptive movie. This movie hates human beings and it hates humanity. And it has a very, very cynical view of humanity. And there is not a single second in this movie where you think to yourself, things might be okay for the world. No, this movie has a very, very strong perspective about humanity. And it lets you know about it, like, very, very, very soon. Each one of our Skype party members is killed off. And like you said, they're not the goriest ways that they die, certainly, which probably is just a limitation of the budget more than anything else. But this movie pretty much thinks that humanity is doomed. In fact, it probably already died out a few years ago, and the human race is just trying to catch up. And I don't know. I guess I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about that, and thinking about how dark this movie is and relentlessly dark this movie is. It made me kind of think about the horror genre as like a political act vis-a-vis like your feelings about people, a filmmaker's feelings about people. I feel like we can watch a movie that's dark, and most horror movies are dark, and yet there are moments of redemption, and there are moments of humor, and there are moments of kindness, and there are little breathing periods, and even Ari Aster, has those things, and This movie had none of it. This movie was just like, fuck people, and fuck you for watching this movie. And I hope you have a terrible night, and I hope your whole life is garbage afterwards. And I part of me admires the gall of that, but also part of me finds it exhausting and also kind of
useless.
I don't know. I don't. Yeah, I don't know what to say. I don't know. I don't have a totally cogent perspective yet. Useless, sure. I don't know. What does what I'm saying resonate with you at all?
Yeah, we talk a lot about this, and I think this is a good sort of capstone to this conversation. We talk a lot about what the way, I phrase it a lot, like, what is a movie trying to tell me? What am I supposed to get from this piece of art? And maybe that's like the virtue of creating art as commentary or creating art with purpose. And I don't know what the purpose of this movie is. Because you're right. All it does at the end, like this movie ends, we can spoil this ending because we are here in spoiler land. What this movie and how this movie ends is the entire time, this was all just a big construct, and every single person, the kidnapped girl, the deaf girlfriend, and all the people that were on this video call were just part of this big elaborate game that 20 to 30,000 people around the world were watching unfold. and it like the movie zooms out, and it was all the strings were being pulled by this one, hacker in a hoodie, like almost literally. I don't know if he was wearing a hoodie, but he definitely had
I believe it is.
The hood might have been down, but like, and that's what the movie is like. They were doomed from the start. They were literally never in control. They had no agency this whole time. They were always going to die. It just depended on what happened before they died. So I don't know the purpose of that. And I think that's sort of what you're asking me is like, the only thing that this movie could possibly be saying is humans are vile, sadistic creatures. And the ones that aren't are doomed to be killed by the ones that are. Like, is that what we're saying? I don't know. Like,
right. Exactly. And like, if the movie is supposed, like, I suppose that the movie was trying to make a comment about safety and security and how at any moment our lives could be completely disrupted and turned around and even ended by our habits online and so forth. But like, even if that were true, even if that is the point of the film, to suggest that the people out there who are looking to make money off your credit card numbers are so vile and ruthless and disgusting and evil and horrible and blah 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 blah. I don't know. That doesn't seem true. It just seems like bullshit.
I think it's a good question. I when the movie ended, I groaned. So I am, because like the last shot of this movie. The problem is what you're saying is correct in that like this movie tries to attack a couple of different things, but it kind of negates all of that by ending the movie with this sort of sinister, like your mind is supposed to be blown at the scale of this whole thing. And it kind of ruins any other possible message you could have had with the movie. What did you think of the ending? Like, how did you experience that like sort of reveal at the end?
Well, I'll answer that question, but are you aware that there are like 3 different endings to this movie?
I think I read that, but I didn't see what the endings are. I'm curious what if you did some reading on what the endings are.
Yeah, I read them. I mean, it doesn't matter, right? I mean, we watched the same movie. We watched the theatrical release, or I don't know. Apparently, when this film was in theaters, both releases were sent out, and it was a crapshoot which one you got, which ending you got. Which to me is like, if I wanted that, I would read my choose your own adventure books from my childhood. I don't care about this. But I mean, I don't know. The ending, it was dumb. It was extremely dumb. No part of this movie wasn't dumb. Do you mean specifically like watching Matthias look at the votes being tallied about whether he should live or die, and then, of course, somehow within a nanosecond getting mowed over by a van?
Yeah,
or do you mean more specifically like the zoom out of this guy in his lab orchestrating the whole thing?
Yeah, I think the zoom out, which and the 20,000 votes or whatever, like
big the whole cabal of hackers is, how big the whole dark web really is.
And that's what the point of the movie is, right? Like there are 20,000 Bitcoin rich people who wanted this to happen the whole time,
right?
I'm just curious if that did that have zero bearing on how you enjoyed the film, or were you able to watch it without that sort of like groan-worthy reveal?
Oh yeah, I had no bearing on the film. The movie had already like kind of ended for me like 45 minutes earlier because like at a certain point it was clear what was happening, what was going to keep happening, and it fell into a rhythm where each party member died one by one, and there were no surprises after that.
Right.
I'm not really sure that there were any surprises in the first place. Oh, I mean, there's the whole surprise, I guess, about that woman, I think Erica, with the hole in her head, stumbling out of the closet in Matthias's bedroom, going straight to the camera. I mean, that was something, I guess. I don't know. It's funny. I think this is a good opportunity to transition into our ratings. But it's really funny. Talking this movie out with you has. I don't think this usually is the case. Usually it's the opposite for me. But talking this movie out with you for the last hour has definitely decreased my enjoyment of it.
So. Well, I think it sometimes is the reverse, right? I think this movie somehow operated on a plane where it was able to have plausible deniability with all the things that you usually dislike about a horror film. For me, I don't know why it didn't strike me as. I am curious as to why, and I think it's because you were able to divorce yourself from some of the actual things that were happening and just sort of be living in this conceptual world of we're all vulnerable to hackers, which is a truly scary and very real thing that happens. Yeah. So, it's interesting. It's normally the opposite. So, I'm happy to be the naysayer this time.
Yeah, sure. So why don't you take it away then? Why don't you give us and the folks listening at home, which is where they should be, why don't you give us your ratings? Let's hear. I would love to hear your scare factor first, followed by your quality factor.
Yeah, of course. So we rate our scariness of these films on a scale from 0 to 5 sheep, as in how many sheep it takes you to fall asleep, or I guess how many keyboards it takes you to run away from the internet. It just wasn't scary. I guess, it deserves more than 0 and frankly, probably more than 1 because it's gross. Some of the implied scariness from some of those videos. So for example, the girl starving to death and and food was being kept just out of arm's reach. That's a horrific death. The part where the girl is in a bathtub and he's about to dump acid on her. That's gross and scary. There's definitely some advanced concepts in this movie. So I'd give it probably 1.5 sheep out of 5. And you want my quality now too?
Yeah, do it. Let's just do 2 and 2.
Cool. So yeah, my quality on this is going to be about I don't know. Because I don't think we're ever going to watch Unfriended for this podcast. I feel the need to give this movie a quality score that somehow encompasses the concept.
I understand.
Which is important because this is I am infinitely impressed with the amount of mileage that is gotten out of, frankly, staring at a computer screen, and how well it's paced, and how this movie was an hour and a half, and it frankly should have been 53 minutes probably.
Right. It could have been a short film, yeah.
But it was an hour and a half, and it did not feel super long, and neither does the first one, because there's something about how they pace a movie like this that I think in the wrong hands, this movie does not feel this good. So, yeah, I think I'm going to give it 2 stars, in even 2, or I guess not stars, maybe spinning MacBook loading wheels.
There you go.
2 spinning MacBook loading wheels is my rating because I think everything that happens in the movie is bad, but the world that this movie lives in is very interesting. So
that was well said. Right. Very good.
What about you? So, what about you, Zachary?
Oh, damn. So yeah, I'm doing the rare. This has not happened to me before. And I swear to you, it'll never happen again. But I'm doing something never before seen, which is that both categories get the same rating. This movie was a 3-star scary for me. It really kind of kept me up, and I was thinking a lot about vulnerability and violation and that sort of thing. And it did freak me out a little bit in a way that I was very impressed by. It somehow manifested a fear in that felt actually applicable to my life, which never happens with horror movies. Even home invasion movies aren't scary to me because it's just not likely. But it's far more likely that I'll get hacked than anything else that happens in a horror movie. I'm not going to get possessed by a demon lord, but I could get hacked. And so I think that's probably why it really freaked me out a little bit.
Yeah. Well, and you had just been emailed your password, so.
And I had just been emailed my password, which I did find, that's right, very disconcerting. And I give it the same rating, same 3 stars in quality. I had fun with this movie. I initially was going to give it 3.5 stars, but the more we talked about it, the dumber it kind of became.
Well, yeah, and I think you knew it was dumb. That's what's so interesting about your rating. I think you gave it a lot of credence that I was surprised at, which is like a real testament to what I was talking about, the pacing and the subject matter. Like, it's a real testament to the director here, because he was able to make something really dumb. And this is what happened to us the first movie, right? We were walking in that theater being like, we're going to watch people on a MacBook, and this is going to be good. Huh. And then we walked out of the theater. Yeah, we walked out of the theater like this was a fucking good movie. So the fact that this movie earned not a dead 0 from both of us is like, again, the bar was low. So
that's right. I think that's correct. That's correct. And that, I mean, oh my God, I mean, that just lays bare the whole issue with rating systems in the first place is how much of it has to do with expectation.
Yeah.
It's just impossible. Well, folks, thank you very much, each and every one of you, for joining us for this episode of Fear and There, in which we discussed Unfriended, Dark Web. It's been great. Jay, I had a lot of fun, as I usually do.
Yeah, thanks for hosting, Zach. And you know, as he said, thanks, listeners. Hit us up on Facebook and the internet. We're fearandthere.com, and you can email us at gmail@fearandthere.com if you have any movie recs or anything.
And you can hack right into that email account too if you wanted. Yeah,
our password is Zach and J 123. Actually,
all
no,
lowercase.
Our password is what was the name? Nora ICV, or no, Nora C the fourth.
Nora C the fourth, which is Sharon backwards.
Yeah, that is our password. So go ahead and log right in.
Make yourself at home.
Well, all Zach, right, thanks for hosting.
You got it, Jay. And until next time, my friend.
Bye now.
Bye.